our next speaker will explain how circular business models, already well established in the automotive sector, can be adapted to accelerate the hydrogen economy through digital innovation and strategic resource management. So please welcome Condon, CEO of Johnson Matthey PLC. Welcome. Great to have you.
Thank you. So thanks a lot for the kind introduction and good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the energy transition, the role of hydrogen in this, but what I'm really going to talk about is the importance of a sustainable business model. Now, everybody here, I believe, is passionate about the energy transition, but what I would argue is we shouldn't be talking about an energy transition, we should be talking about an energy addition. And I want to give you a concrete example about this. I think there was a while where we all believed that the energy transition would result in less material usage, we'd have lots of circularity, and we'd have less emissions. What has actually happened since the 90s is we're using 70% more energy. So despite the massive increase in renewable energy, the amount of hydrocarbons being used every year has basically remained the same. It's an energy addition and not a transition. Now, if you take the example here in a space that I'm familiar with Johnson Matthey, a company that was formed over 200 years ago, a world leader in platinum group metals, so we're very interested in precious metals. You look at the automotive sector, and everybody believes EVs, electric vehicles, is the way forward, and I believe that too. But what's underestimated is, look at the metal content in an electric vehicle versus a standard gasoline car. You're talking about more than 140 kilograms of metals that need to be used in every single car versus a gasoline car. And the vast majority of EVs today are used in China, and the power for those cars is not coming from renewable electricity, it's actually coming from coal-fired power stations. So clearly, this is not a sustainable path forward. We won't be able to mine enough metals to be able to power a zero-emission world. What's going to be really, really important is that we drive circularity forward so that whatever is available can be used in the most sustainable manner forward. Otherwise, we just will not be able to manage the energy transition, which is really, again, an addition. Now, question is, how are we doing from an energy addition point of view, and how are we doing from a circularity point of view? Reality is we're pretty poor. Europe has set itself the goal in the latest Clean Industrial Deal, which is the successor of the Green Deal. Europe wants to be the global market leader in circularity by 2030. Where are we today in Europe? 12% of materials is recycled today. 2025, 12%. We are doing a terrible, terrible job. And look particularly at the fossil fuel related materials, which form the basis of many, many products throughout Europe, throughout the world today, only 3% recycling. So why is it so bad? The unfortunate reality is the business case for recycling often doesn't work. If the business case doesn't work, it doesn't matter how green your principles are, your business model is not going to be sustainable and you won't get to a better place. So the number one issue, I believe, is not necessarily technology. We have the technology available in multiple industries to get to a better place from a circularity point of view. What we do not usually have is sustainable business models. The second issue related to that is a lack of infrastructure. There's a lack of infrastructure because the business models are not there, so there's a lack of investment in required infrastructure to make circularity work. The unfortunate reality is it's cheaper to throw away stuff than to recycle it. This is something we absolutely have to change. And the last piece is there is often a lack of awareness of consumer. Consumer demand can drive behavior. Now, I want to share an example where circularity does work, an existing business model, because I believe those principles are applicable to many, many other industries, and it's important to learn from them. So in our business, Platinum Group Metals, there is very clearly a business case. Why is there a business case? Two reasons. One is we have a valuable product. You only need to use grams of our product and it has a high value, so it's actually worth recycling. So the intrinsic value is an important piece. A second piece is regulation. One of our biggest businesses today is automotive catalysts. The catalytic converter. You cannot decide to have one or not have one. The regulator has said every single car, every single truck has to have one. So that regulatory support is actually fundamental. And I think as everyone here thinks about whatever area you're in, whatever your business model is, you need to have that intrinsic value component, plus ideally a regulatory supportive package. The second element, which is really important, often underestimated, is having a supportive ownership model. Most of what we do is in a closed loop model. Closed loop model means the customer who buys our product has it in an eternal loop and has an intrinsic motivation that the product is constantly coming back, is getting recycled, and is getting put out as new product. They buy it once, and it goes in a constant loop. So the customer has this intrinsic interest that the whole system actually works. So a supportive closed loop model is highly important. A third element, and I spoke about the lack of infrastructure, what's really important in our market is you have a lot of specialized players along the value chain who collaborate together. If you think of something like the automotive market, you have the car going to a scrap dealer will send it to a smelter will send it to somebody else who'll do further refining, and we will then, through chemicals synthesis, we will basically take out the precious metals, develop new products, and get them back out in the market. That's a highly specialized value chain that works across the world. There are no barriers from a trade point of view here, but really important that this is a value chain that has grown together with many specialized players, and because of that, you have a cost advantage that again supports the overall business model. And the last piece, which I think is more important going forward, hasn't been so important to date, but as the world moves towards carbon taxes, in Europe, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, and other means of supporting or penalizing carbon, this element of the business case will become more important because, of course, if you're using something like a PGM that has been recycled, it has inherently 97% less carbon than something that has been mined from the ground. So these are principles that I think can apply to any business model, any industry, but it's important that they all need to work together. There's not one or two that needs to work for the model to work. You need them all to work in synchronization. Now, specifically to hydrogen. Hydrogen's a really interesting space where I remember vividly in the 80s when I was in school, somebody coming from the Ford Motor Company coming into my school at the time and telling us that fuel cell hydrogen-powered vehicles were going to be the vehicles of the future 40 years ago. And I think that person was right because they are still going to be the vehicles of the future, but they just haven't arrived yet. Why hasn't the hydrogen economy taken off? It hasn't taken off because the cost of renewable electricity is too high, because the infrastructure doesn't exist, and because the regulatory requirements that are needed to support the takeoff of the industry are not yet there. So again, this is a key point, I think, going forward. If we want this industry to take off, and if you really want to drive circularity, you need to look at the whole business model and tackle it as a holistic system. Only looking at one piece of the circularity chain will not get you to a sustainable output. Now, we believe hydrogen will be absolutely crucial to get to net zero. The vast majority of emissions will over time be eliminated through electrification, but electrification also requires a carrier of energy. You can't store and transport wind, but you can store and transport hydrogen as an energy vector and put it to the place where it's required. And then if you think of things like shipping, airplanes, big heavy-duty trucks that won't be able to be electrified because you'd need so many batteries that you just wouldn't work. This is where hydrogen can, in and of itself, be an energy vector. So has a crucial role to play. And I give one final example here, again using precious metals to explain the circularity component and why this is going to be so important for hydrogen to take off. And I think what's really important to understand here is for hydrogen, the hydrogen economy to take off, basically electrolysis has to take off on a big scale. And for electrolysis to take off on a big scale, so breaking down with renewable energy, water into hydrogen and oxygen, a super efficient way of doing that is using iridium as a catalyst. Now, iridium has a slight challenge in that it's an extremely rare metal. The amount of iridium that is mined every year is about 2 suitcases full of the stuff. That's it, globally, 2 suitcases. It weighs an awful lot, so you wouldn't want to be carrying this through the airport because this is really heavy stuff, but there's not much of it. And what this slide is telling you is, if you look at the amount of iridium that's available now and going forward, and you don't really do anything, with the pink bar, you can basically see if there's no innovation and no recycling, you're not going to get very far with iridium. The light blue bar says if there's innovation, meaning thrifting, meaning we're using R&D, to use as little of every single metal as possible to get the beneficial effect, which is often supported by digital means. This is a lot of machine learning. This is a lot of statistical modeling. Through innovation, we can significantly increase the availability of iridium, but it still doesn't get you anywhere near where you need to be. It's the dark blue bar where you can see it's the combination of innovation and recycling, circularity, that gets you to an amount of iridium in this case that would allow you to actually have hydrogen as a key part of the overall energy transition or addition and actually get to a net zero economy. Without innovation and without recycling, without circularity, it just will not happen. And this is one specific example related to PEM electrolyzers and the use of iridium. You can replicate this across multiple models in multiple industries. The same principles will apply. It's innovation and it's circularity, or you do not get to net zero. So my final point here, just wrapping it up, and I cannot emphasize how important this is from the get-go, because I know there's a lot of very, very enthusiastic academics and innovators in the audience. You have to think of the business model from the get-go. If you don't have a sustainable business model, it doesn't matter how good the technology is, it's not going to have the impact that your innovation deserves. So please think deeply about the business case behind it, think about the value, and think about the regulatory supporting system that's going to be required to ensure you can tap into the value. Second point is, don't think as an island. You got to work across a value chain, and you're going to have to work with partners. You've got to figure out your position in the value chain, but you've got to make your contribution and make sure the value chain is connected, otherwise your business model won't work. And the last piece is, at the end of the day, everything is dependent on innovation. We're not going to get to a net zero economy without innovation. We're not going to get to a net zero economy without circularity. So I believe if we take these principles to heart, we can get to a much better place. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Liam. Thank you so much for this great insight.